Patrick Christie's here at Westmonster. I'm joined today by James Cleverly, Tory MP for Braintree. Thank you very much for joining us today, James.
Happy to.
The main thing we're here to talk about today is something that's slipped under the radar a bit so far with regards to Brexit, and that's the impact that the EU has had on Commonwealth nations. And so, firstly, how did Britain joining the EU, or the EEC as it was then, affect our relationship with Commonwealth countries?
Well, it was a massive change for the Commonwealth. Up until the time when we joined the EU, the British Parliament, British government, on both political sides were pretty committed to the Commonwealth. There was this kind of, I think, residual goodwill generated by, for example, the Commonwealth troops that fought during both the First and Second World Wars. So there was a very strong bond, and that influenced policy massively, particularly trade policy. We bought the vast bulk, for example, of New Zealand lamb exports. We had very, very close ties. We had this Commonwealth preference where we went to the Commonwealth first whenever possible. When we joined the EU, obviously that all changed, and it caused a fair bit of bad will, I think it would be fair to say. Caused huge economic difficulties for New Zealand, that has been a defining moment in the relationship between the UK and a lot of the Commonwealth for a long time. Now, most of that difficulty is flushed through the system over the years, but I know, speaking to a lot of people in the Commonwealth involved in politics and trade, they're very, very keen to reconnect with the UK, which, let's remember, is one of the largest economies in the world and a prize very well worth pursuing.
Absolutely, and that's what I wanted to touch on now, post-Brexit, if we fast forward however long it's going to take, and what are the opportunities out there for Britain? Do you think this could be really lucrative to get a good financial, economic relationship back with the Commonwealth, with our historic ties, as it were?
Well, there are lots of natural advantages with the Commonwealth. We have, for the most part, shared language, often a shared legal system. We have pre-existing family ties, big diaspora communities in each other's countries. And also, the Commonwealth straddles some very, very large developed economies like Canada, Australia, for example, some very, very large emerging economies or emerged economies like India, for example, but also a number of countries with massive growth potential, both in Asia and in Africa. And if we can utilise those pre-existing advantages, as I say, the legal system, language, etc., it means we can speed up the process of developing our trading relationships, which I think will be very, very good for us as a country. I think it will be very good for a lot of those particularly emerging economies, having a kind of a shortcut into one of the most lucrative markets, and the UK is a very lucrative trade target.
Do you find it a bit frustrating when Remainers talk about, severing ties with our brothers and sisters on the continent, where in actual fact, when we joined the EU, we severed a lot of ties with our more historic brothers and sisters, frankly, around the world? What do you make of that?
Yeah, and there is a legitimate argument to say that our membership of the EU didn't automatically mean that we had to distance ourselves from the Commonwealth nations, but that is kind of what happened, and we definitely, over the last 40, 45 years, became much more European focused than globally focused. Now, I wouldn't want us to diminish one relationship because of another.
Yeah.
What I hope we can achieve is maintain close economic ties with our closest economic partners in Europe, but also reconnect with some of these countries that we've had historic relationships with, but we've allowed those relationships to wither. That's the sweet spot. It's not doing one or the other, It's about doing both.
And so Theresa May's got a big announcement coming up on Friday, supposedly, about Brexit. I mean, what would you like to see in this announcement as far as you're concerned with regards to Brexit?
Well, the obvious top-line stuff is to reassure the country that the decision that we took in June of 2016 will be respected. What I want is for her to put forward a positive vision of what Brexit could mean for us, highlight some opportunities both with the EU, remaining EU nations, but also more globally. And also what I suspect we'll see is her putting some meat on the bones as to the plans post-Brexit, because although it's not possible to give a cast iron guarantee about what the world is going to look like, no politician is in a position to do that. I think what's clear is people are just saying, well, what is this going to look like? How is this going to play out? So, giving a bit more clarity around that, I think would be good.
Yeah, and there was a lot that's made this morning, if you believe what you read in the papers, which is obviously entirely up to you, but about maybe this 40 or 45 billion pounds Brexit bill being bandied about. I mean, we've seen numbers like this before, but I mean, where do you stand on that? Should we pay them anything, or what do you think?
Well, I think the position that we're seeing is that the strict legal foundation for this number is not particularly strong. So I think our view is that there is not necessarily a legal obligation, but there is a goodwill, kind of moral imperative for this. And we don't want to leave the EU on bad terms. I think that would be counterproductive to everyone involved. So I think what we should do is we should be willing to consider a sum of money. Exactly how much that sum of money is will depend entirely on what kind of deal we can strike. So I think kicking around a particular figure at this stage might be a bit premature, but it depends what other things we can tie down. But I'm not opposed at all to the divorce bill to give it its common name. What I would feel uncomfortable with is the idea of ongoing payments for market access, because there's a word for payments to access a free market. It's called a tariff, and if you're imposing tariffs, then it's not a free market. So, a one-off payment, I think is quite possibly appropriate. But kind of ongoing payments to access or to do a free trade deal, I'd be a bit uncomfortable with that.
And just lastly now, there was a lot made over the weekend about this infamous article from Boris Johnson in the Telegraph, reigniting this £350 million a week for the NHS, etc. I mean, where do you stand on that? Was he being a bastion of Brexit, or was he kind of opening old wounds? What do you think?
Well, there was so much of a row over that 350 million figure. The underpinning of it, I get. When we talk about our own salaries, no one ever talks about the net salary. You talk about your salary before tax, and the fact that money the full gross salary never hits your bank account doesn't stop us talking about it in gross terms. So I get the logic behind it. The simple truth of the matter is that whether it's 350 million or less than that, we still spend hundreds of millions of pounds per week to be a member of the European Union. And when we stop being a member of the European Union, then we will have much more control over how that money is spent. Boris's point was that he would personally like to see a significant proportion of that extra money going on the NHS. I think there are a lot of people in the party that would have sympathy with that. But ultimately, the whole thing about Brexit is we get to decide how we spend all of our money rather than just some of it. And I think for me, that was the point I think he was trying to get across.
Excellent. James Cleverly MP, thank you very much.
Thank you.